Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card has a new technique with stencils. I'm going to be using this My Favorite Things scrolled background stencil. You can use any detailed stencil. I'm also using the Butterfly Basics, but just that sentiment and then these stitched circles from Simon Says Stamp. So I'm going to start off by taking my ink foam applicator and some chipped sapphire distress ink. I've got my Nina Solar White cardstock in 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm going to apply light pressure and moving on toward the center of the cardstock, and I'm going to cover the whole thing with chipped sapphire. Now I'm going to speed through this because I'm going to put on a lot of ink, and I do spend quite a bit of time because I'm really careful about not getting too many of the blocks, but the more ink you put on your cardstock, the less blocky it will look. And I'm going to pretty heavily coat this cardstock with the chipped sapphire. And you can use any color for this technique, by the way. Darker colors I think work best. So I'm going to take my stencil, I'm going to cover it on my cardstock, I'm going to flip it over because I like to adhere my cardstock to the stencil. And I'm just going to use some surgical tape, it's just a thin paper tape. And I'm going to cut 4 pieces. I'm going to put one on each side to make sure that my cardstock doesn't move when I'm doing the technique. Alright, now I'm ready to go. So all you have to do, it's really simple, is take a baby wipe and you're just going to dab the open areas of the stencil. And you're going to go just down and up, down and up, down and up. If you move or twist your hand, you'll kind of pull the paper up a little bit because it's going to be wet. Now the water reacts with the distress ink, you can see, and it will remove the color just where the open areas are. So I did find that it actually pushed the color out to the edges, which makes it so beautiful. You'll see when I remove the stencil here. Now if your baby wipe dries up a little bit, or if you just have dry baby wipes because they're a little old, you can just spritz it with just a little bit of water and then go back to work. Now this works much better than putting like water on with a paintbrush or a spritzer. This really applies the water in exactly the areas that you need it. You can see the back of my paper is all kind of blue from the chipped sapphire, and it's still wet, but I'm anxious to look at it, so I'm just going to remove the tape from the stencil, not from the paper itself, because the paper's still wet and I don't want it to tear when I take the tape off. So as I peel it off the stencil, you'll see how pretty this look is. And you really need to use distress inks because those react great with the water. But you can try with all different colors. I think that this technique has a lot of possibilities. Okay, moving on to the rest of the card, I'm going to take some VersaFine black onyx ink and that sentiment from my Butterfly Basics set. And I just have a piece of cardstock that is extra, so I just stamped it right on there. And then I'll take my Simon Says Stamp stitch circles. I'm going to take the third one from the outside and I'm going to center it on top of the sentiment I just stamped, and I'll run that through the big shot. Now it gives a stitch on the inside and on the outside, which is really cool about these dies. Now I'm going to take my butterfly punch. This is the small Stampin' Up! Butterfly punch. It's got a really nice butterfly shape. Now I thought about texturing these butterflies in some way, but I thought there was so much busyness in the card itself that I just wanted to keep the butterflies simple. So I decided to take a white gel pen and just draw 3 dots down the middle, and you'll see why when I add some white string, how this continues the white color. So you see how simple that is. So I'm just going to do that on all 4 of these butterflies. And then I'm going to wait for my blue panel to dry because it's going to be easier to cut when it's dry. I'm going to take the Simon Says Stamp second circle from the outside and center it on my panel and run it through my big shot. Now I also removed the surgical tape, which actually my cardstock was still a little bit damp, and that's probably why I had a little bit of an issue, but you probably will experience a little bit of tearing. I did on the back, but because it's on the back, to me, I didn't really care that much, so I just kept ripping it off. But if it bothers you, you could take a scissor and cut your tape just along the edge so you can just keep half the tape on there, and that works fine too because it's just going to be adhered to a card base. Or if your paper tears, like mine, then you can just take a 2-way glue pen. I just added a couple of dots in there and I pressed it down, and it's as good as new. And that was the only area that tore for me. So the next thing I'm going to do is trim off about 1/8 of an inch on either side. I'm doing it on either side because I've got that center circle that I want to keep centered. And that'll provide some white cardstock on either side when I put it on the base. This is some white twine by Stampin' Up! I love it because you can dye it. I've dyed it before. It's a nice, soft, pretty white string. So I'm going to wrap that around the top and the bottom here, and I'll just put some ATG tape runner on the back, and that's what I'm going to use to adhere it. And then I went ahead and put some Scotch foam tape all along the back there. And I've got a piece of smoky slate Stampin' Up! Cardstock. It's kind of a very light gray. It's a really pretty color. And I'm going to adhere that down. And then I'll put some ATG tape runner on the gray, the smoky slate, and I'll adhere that now to my card base, which is just the standard Nina Solar White, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'll adhere my sentiment in the center, so I have a nice little circle of smoky slate underneath, and put that on with some dimensionals. And then I'll take my butterfly and I'm going to put a glue dot in the center of each one of these butterflies, and I'm bending it so that the wings are coming up off the card a little bit. Here's my last butterfly. And then finally I will take my string again and I'm going to create a bow to put on the top of those bottom 2 butterflies. So when you take the string off of this holder, it kind of bends when it wraps around it, and so this is really easy to get rid of. All you have to do is hold it between your nail and your finger, and you just kind of run it across your finger a few times. And if you don't have nails, maybe you can get a friend to do it, but it really takes that crimp out just perfectly, so then you have to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and make my bow. I usually make my bows without cutting anything, and usually they come out terrible, as you can see, and then I just pull the tails until I get it to the right size, and I kind of work it a little bit. And this twine is really forgiving and allows you to reshape it and things like that, so I love this twine. So I'll cut that other end off, and I like to put my bows on cardstock with glue dots. So I kind of mush it a little bit into a ball with my finger, and then I put it down where I want it to go. Rather than putting it on the bow, I put it on the cardstock, and that way I know it's going exactly where I want it. And then I just press my bow on there. That way I don't have to wait for anything to dry, and the bow totally covers up this mini glue dot, so you don't have to worry about it sticking to anything. So I'm just going to kind of arrange it here, and I decided to put the tails underneath this butterfly underneath it, and then I'll just trim off the excess so that they're both the same length. And then that will be the card for today. I love this technique. It's so fun and it looks so cool. I'm going to try it with a few other colors to see what I can come up with. So anyway, hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.